This is my opening theme. The song that I wanted to use wouldn't work, so this is my opening theme. Welcome to the inaugural episode of my show, aptly titled My Show, because it is my show and not somebody else's show. Although if somebody else's show is named My Show, I can assure you that it's not my show, it is their show. On today's show, I'll be answering question B. Are there any technological expansions or game design features from the 70s or 80s that have any redeeming value to games in the current or even future generations? The short answer is yes, and the long answer is yes. Believe me you, that could have went on much longer, but I digress. Now, the 70s and 80s brought a lot of innovation to both sides of that question, but I'm going to start with the technological expansions first, because if there was no hardware, there would be no software to run it on. Definitely the most important innovation of the industry, especially in a world that's dominated by home consoles, is of course the Channel F with their interchangeable cartridges that was first introduced in 1976. Without the ability to change the games that were played on your system, I have no doubt that the industry would be beyond dead right now. Whether it was Pong or Halo or even the most interesting game in the world, playing the same game over and over and over again for so many years until another system came out would just bore you to death after a while, and then having to wait those large gaps between the releases of systems would just be intolerable, and eventually people would just say, I don't want to anymore. I don't want to play games. They're not fun. And I don't want to drop $300 on something that I'm going to get bored with in a few months, and then wait a few years for something new to come out. I guess I can tie this into another one of my points, which is actually a software bit, but without interchangeable cartridges, Activision wouldn't have been able to create the whole system of third-party support. Now, despite the fact that Bobby Kotick treats Activision like a real-life umbrella corporation, could you imagine a world without any Call of Duty, or no Guitar Hero, or none of the, no Tony Hawk, none of those awesome games that they have actually made? Speaking of evil Sith corporations that are apparently trying to suck the fun out of game making, we probably wouldn't have EA as it is today either. And if there was no EA, we'd probably still be getting our Super Nintendo and even Nintendo 64 games in little sandwich baggies. Meanwhile, PlayStation and other disc-based games would finally upgrade to those amazing paper sleeves from GameStop. Yeah, that's right. Electronic Arts in the early 80s were the ones that actually invented the what would become the standard for the official game case for all future game makers. Another hardware innovation that actually came around in the arcade times was not using an actual traditional joystick or controller. Good examples of this are Seawolf or Battlezone, or even Lunar Lander. In today's age, it's pretty obvious to see how this has a big effect. The Wii, especially, with the motion controls, Guitar Hero, again, with the guitar controller, but even before all these games came out, DDR with the dance pad, for instance, or even the arcade game Silent Scope, that you use an actual sniper rifle as opposed to just a regular light gun. My final hardware innovation, which didn't really take off until about recently actually with the 360 and everything, Ralph Baer created a camera for an arcade game, which for the same reasons that it was canceled then, it seems like it's still a bad idea now, as if you've ever beaten somebody who was a sore loser on Xbox Live, you've probably seen more male anatomy than you care to admit. On to the software. Defender was the first game that used more than a single screen, and it's pretty obvious how much of a big impact that had on that. Could you imagine any game being made now today that still took place on a single screen that didn't change? Also, first on the Atari was Easter eggs, actually. The first Easter egg ever was found in Adventure, and it allowed the creators to add some of their own personal touch to things without, breaking the immersion of the game itself too much. My last two examples are actually going to touch on design innovations that have impacted the industry in a more negative fashion. The first would be Dragon Lair. I'm sure it was awesome for its time, but QuickTime events suck. And my next point is E.T. and licensed console games in general. It's honestly very surprising to me on how poor of an example E.T. set with production and quality and everything like that, and how strictly we've adhered to that for any licensed game making procedure, with the only two exceptions I can think of being GoldenEye and Chronicles of Riddick. Well, that's it. That's my show. I hope you've enjoyed it and learned something. I would play the opening theme to go out, but I'd run out of time, so thank you for listening.